What's everybody up? Arch Manning talk today. Should NFL teams tank for him? Should they not? I'm going to explain reasons I don't think they should at all, with some key points around Arch Manning. One that'll really surprise you. It surprised me when I heard it. But anyways, a lot of unprovens here, obviously, right? Some provens as well. I'll get into all of it. My name's Peter Bartell. At Pigskin PD is the handle on X. Follow it there. You can see it on screen. And then also subscribe to the channel. Try to record 4 to 5 of these a week. Keep you guys informed. Just have fun, right? I'm a fan like you all are consuming this and just like to talk sports, like to embrace different opinions, diversity of thought, etc. Around football, college and pro. So this one is kind of half and half, right? College and pro. I feel like would intrigue here. Comment. Let me know what you think as we're going on in this episode. This color that I have may confuse some, and I'll get into that further in the episode as well, but I'll give you a guess until I state it later in the episode what NFL team this color code is for. It's obviously not burnt orange for the Longhorns where he is currently. Hook 'em, right? But anyways, we'll get into the episode here. My reasons I don't think teams should tank on Arch Manning, whether or not he's worth tanking for. And let me know if you think he is, in the NFL and tanking, just in case people aren't familiar with the term and what it all means and everything. Tanking is when a team purposely loses, purposely doesn't do well for certain players because you have a chance at getting that player because you're higher in the draft, right? The NFL, unless there's a trade involved, is for draft position for that following year is merely based on team performance / record from the year prior. So the worst team, for example, was the Titans this past year. They get the number 1 overall pick, etc. Typically, unless, again, there's like a trade like the Bears and the Panthers had a trade a few years ago, which impacted the draft order, etc. So typically it's like that, right? And therefore a team says, well, we know we're not going to make the playoffs. We know we're going to be awful. Let's just be really awful so we get the best option on the board, right? For a few years now, since he's been in high school, Arch Manning was coveted as a recruit at the college level. And now that he's shown a little bit in college as a starting quarterback, he's now starting to be talked about and coveted at the NFL level because he is draft eligible in 2026 NFL draft. Not this year, but the following is when he's first eligible. And I'm alluding to a key point later in the episode with that statement. But anyways, that's what tanking is, right? So you tank for a guy, presumably like Arch, who there's a high school game here playing of Arch, so you can see some highlights in the background of him too. But, this past year, just for example, there's a rumor teams are never going to outwardly say, like GM and the owner, yeah, we told our team and our coach to tank. But it's known that it could be a thing, no matter the sport, right? Now, in hockey and basketball, I don't know how baseball works, but those two sports, hockey and basketball, they have a draft lottery. So it's like the top 10 teams or whatever the number is. I don't know the actual number. They stream live or show live on TV the commissioner pulling a ball, like the lottery, literally, out of a hat, and teams, I guess, have different probability based on how bad they do to get the number 1 overall pick, but it's not guaranteed just based off of record. There's factors, right? So like if you have the worst record, you have a higher probability chance of getting the number 1 overall pick than the team with the 8th worst record, so to speak, or 7th or 10th. So in theory, you should get that, but it's probability. You've seen it before in both those sports. The number 1 most probable team oftentimes does not hit that pick. So that's a way to circumvent or counter-circumvent teams from doing the tanking purposely, right? Which I love. I think that's a great idea because that's exactly what it does. Teams are no longer like, well, we're guaranteed the number 1 pick if we go, poor record in that sport. They can't do that. They're no longer guaranteed. So it's like, we're not going to be really bad to maybe get a really good guy. In football, you can do that, right? Patriots this past year. Rumor is they tanked at the end of the year. They fired their coach because he opted not to tank and try to win the game. Gerard Mayo being a former player. Who knows if that's true, if Kraft ordered that. But anyways, just to explain tanking a little bit, and we'll get into it here now, why I think teams should not tank for Arch Manning. Arch, by the way, on 3 has him listed as the number 1 overall recruit in the 2023 class, which is what he was. If you remember seeing this guy recruited out of high school, man, every school he went to, that the fans at Georgia and Athens had their chest painted Arch Manning in the student section. Every school rode out the red carpet. Texas especially spent, like, I forget the number. It was millions more than a typical recruiting weekend, the weekend that they knew Arch was taking his official visit. So going to the game and everything, I mean, this kid was coveted. Number 1 recruit out of high school nationally, consensus, according to On3. Number 1 recruit then obviously out of the state of Louisiana, which is loaded with talent. Isidore Newman's where he went to high school. It was at the 3A level, from what I understand, so not the top level in Louisiana. That's not a knock on Arch. That's where Arch resided and where he went to high school. So just stating it is what it is. But they did very well. Arch did very well in high school and then propelled himself to a full ride to Texas, where he opted to play for Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns. He's been behind Quinn Ewers the past 2 seasons as the backup quarterback. And that was planned, right? What people did not know heading into 2024, when Arch or Quinn Ewers was coming back to college, if Arch would get wet feet or hot feet and transfer, like a lot of QBs do after their true freshman season nowadays, because they can transfer whenever at the drop of a hat. People were questioning, well, Arch is the real deal. Is he going to transfer to another SEC school, another school in general? Auburn was talked about because of the mediocre the year they had with Peyton Thorne under Hugh Freeze. Didn't happen. I think it would have made sense, but I think Arch was also smart and got guidance, obviously, from his uncles, Eli and Peyton, and Cooper, his dad, and grandfather Arch as well, the whole lineage there. That, you know, these are guys that have been there, done that. And you know, they said, dude, you're best off staying put, learning from Sarkisian. Sarkisian's an offensive mastermind. Texas is a program with resources, weapons. Everything's right at Texas right now, right? And good things come to those who wait, right? Like, you look at Peyton and Eli. They both stayed 4 years in college. Peyton could have gone and been drafted first overall. Peyton came back to Tennessee to get his degree, to finish, and all that stuff, you know, and that's just the cloth that they're from. And obviously that served Peyton and Eli well, staying off 4 years, right? Eli at Ole Miss. So obviously Arch has been groomed to say, look, they don't dart here, there, and everywhere. I mean, look at a guy like Jaden Rashada, right? He started at Arizona State, then he went to Florida, then he went to Georgia, and now he's transferring again. Like, what has that guy done besides gain 5 stars out of high school? That's just one example. I'm sure you can name 30 more in the chat. You know what I mean? But to that point, I think Arch is best for staying put. But also that alludes to, you know, he could stay put for more than 1 season. I think that's a big point here, and why I think overarching, and I'll get into more nuances, teams should not tank for him. Because you're not just tanking, you're tanking presuming he's going to come out in 2026. He does not have to. He is a redshirt sophomore. So right now he has 2 more years of college eligibility left, right? Actually, he was a redshirt freshman. My bad. Second year, right? 2023 class. So he has 3 more years of college athletic eligibility because he redshirted his freshman year. So 3 more years, right? He's not going to stay all 3. I think anybody would presume that. Like, and again, this big if, but knock on wood, if he does well, he would presumably come out after the 2020, at latest 2027 draft. So he would have been a 4th-year junior at that point. Had started the past 2 years for the Longhorns. That's what many are presuming he's going to do. Therefore, guys, we're in February 2025. Why would you already plan to tank if you're an NFL team? Don't do it, because you're tanking, banking on the fact that not that he's going to be available in 2027 for the draft. No, you're tanking, assuming that he's going to be available in 2026. And Archie, or sorry, not Archie, but Eli and Peyton, this is what I learned, have both come out and said they want him to stay multiple years at Texas. His dad, Cooper, is going to say the same thing. I don't mention Cooper as much, obviously, although he is the parent, the dad, and Arch's mom as well, just because Peyton and Eli are Peyton and Eli. They have longer football careers, which, side note, Cooper played, I guess, as a freshman at football at Ole Miss. He opted for baseball career, but yeah, I didn't know that till recently. So, but aside, Peyton and Eli are the big names as it comes to football, right? Family ties with football. Arch too, although a little bit older, different generation. So all three, right? He's getting guidance. That guidance, I can't you're not going to question like guys that were Eli and Peyton that can both show him Super Bowl rings, plural, and say together, and say, dude, this is what happens if you stay. This may be what happened, cough, cough, Anthony Richardson, if you leave. I'm not an AR fan. Sorry. I'll just use him as an example. There's 50,000 other ones, but it does him a service staying in college, I believe. So again, he's getting guidance from people that are saying stay 2 years as a starting quarterback, start 2 years, not just one. So if you're an NFL team, why would you do that? That's mainly why you shouldn't, is you don't know if this kid's going to come out. Arch's decision is Arch's decision. It's not any NFL team saying, oh, we're going to draft you first if you come out. Like, they can come out and say that. Truthfully, they could. That doesn't mean that Arch is going to leave. Arch's decision is Arch's decision. And if his decision is to stay in college for 2 more years as a starter, I applaud it. And I think that's what he should do. And I'm glad he's getting that guidance. But that's also a reason that if you're an NFL team right now thinking about making decisions right now organizationally around tanking, that's not good. I've never heard of tanking 2 years out, and you shouldn't think about it 2 years out. You shouldn't presume that just because it's Arch Manning, he had a good small sample size this past year. He was highly recruited out of high school. And even if he is the real deal in 2025 that he shows us, he's going to come out. Right now, he's actually the Heisman favorite on pretty much any odds makers board. By the way, preseason though. So teams that I could see tanking for this, that I think would be the wrong decision. I've heard this talked about on other podcasts and everything. It's not like gospel. Like, I heard this from insiders or whatever with the team. But we're fans, right? We just like to, speculate and everything. The Titans. Good guess. If you guessed the color here, that's the one I said at the beginning of the episode. This year, the Titans have the first overall pick in the draft. The top QB's position value, right? I'm not saying they're the best players in the draft, but position value, quarterback reigns, it is what it is. Everybody's looking for that next Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, etc. Lamar Jackson. The Titans are looking for that. Will Levis did not work out, is not working out. They're in a position right now where they have the number 1 overall pick, and they happen to have a need at quarterback. Those two things totally coinciding without a trade or anything is very rare in the NFL. The Titans have that opportunity. Position value, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Warner, number 1, 2 quarterbacks, clear cut. Depending on who you take, you could split it 50-50. Everybody has their own preference. Theoretically, the Titans hang on to the pick. They should take Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. There's been talk, however, that they trade away the pick to get somebody else, a position of need, and trade away the number 1 overall pick, which has been done in years before. I don't think they should for a couple reasons. One, like I said, it actually aligns where they need a quarterback and they have the number 1 overall pick, which is gold. 2, you could be presumably maybe tanking for Arch Manning next year, crossing your fingers for that and saying, oh, we'll just be bad for a year, sign a free agent QB somehow, which minus Sam Darnold, and if you want to say Aaron Rodgers, you can, but like the free agent quarterback market is absolutely bone dry right now. So that's a concern. So if you're banking on that, I'm not saying they are, but just theorizing here, it's a scenario I've heard. Other teams, the Steelers, Mike Tomlin, they're struggling at QB right now. Justin Fields is currently maybe the answer, depending on who they draft. The Cowboys, that's really a Jerry being Jerry thing. And he could say, I got a new head coach. I'm just going to puppet master Brian Schottenheimer and tell him just chill for a year, be bad for a year, and let's get Arch Manning. Keep him in Texas, right? Played for the Horns. So that's more of a Jerry thing. And then the Saints are just bad right now. They're at a deficit salary cap wise. So that would actually kind of make sense if there's any that would, even at the 2-year mark, if he stayed for 2 more years in college. I think they're like 34 million or something over the cap or in deficit or something I heard. Spencer Rattler, Derek Carr are their answers, maybe plural, 5 question marks. So you get what I'm saying, right? They're in a big situation right now. And also it's in New Orleans, ironically enough. So anyways, Those are some teams I could see tanking, just overarching, or maybe having bad seasons, let's say going into 2026. Maybe that would have a shorter arch. A lot of stuff changes though. That's my next point. Another point you should not tank for Arch beyond the years is I looked at some preseason draft boards. I was intrigued to see how much of these line, because I just remember a couple positions and names last year that were like, wow, this is wild pertaining to the quarterback position. So I went back for us and looked at the last 2 years. My point to be, you never know what's going to happen. Right now, people are banking that Arch is going to be great in 2025 off of pretty much exactly what you're seeing on screen. High school film, high school on-3 recruiting ranking, and a little bit of college film. I should say a little bit more than a little bit, right? He had 2 starts, played in 3 games. He played against UTSA early this year when Quinn went out midway through the game. He threw 4 touchdowns in that game. And he had like a massive run too. I think it was like a record-breaking run. I think that was the game when he did that, and maybe it was Colorado State. He went in one of those games. By the way, it might have been Colorado State. He went in. But anyways, then he starts for sure in a couple games. Louisiana Monroe being one, non-con, and then Mississippi State where he tore it up. Mississippi State was his best game, 325 yards, 26 for 31 passing, 2 TDs, 33 yards rushing. Overall, college 2024, he had 939 yards passing, 67.8 completion percentage, and those limited starts, limited action against Georgia and Florida the following weeks too. However, that's limited, right? And again, those weren't the cream of the crop teams. You played FBS school, like group of 5 schools, and then you played the worst team in the SEC in 2024, Mississippi State, arguably. So, you know what I mean? Like we're really sample sizing right now. If you're going into 2025 pre-draft process as a team, the Titans or anybody else, do not even come close to thinking about tanking for this specific player. That's an issue if you are. That's my opinion. Some examples of how also this stuff changes. Like I said, we don't know truly what we're getting from this guy, 16, Manning, Arch. In 2023, in the different draft boards, right? I looked at about 5. I'm not going to name the sites really, but, different sites out there and different talk and everything. And I remember some of this too, obviously being a fan. But in 2023, both positions that were quarterbacks and non-quarterbacks that really were way different than when they got drafted were Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State. He was projected 3rd of the Bears by some preseason. Brian Brzee, who ended up, I think, 2nd round from Clemson. I love Brzee, by the way. Love him. He had a lot of injuries, though, right? That caught up to him, especially at his career, and that alters things. So he actually had a very good year for the Saints. I'm super pleased and intrigued by his career, but I'm just saying mock drafts had him 5th. Now for the biggest one here, the biggest surprise for me, preseason, and I bought into this too, Kayshon Boutte with LSU. And he actually had a pretty good year for the Patriots this year. Sorry, they drafted him 5th round, guys, when they actually drafted him. Preseason going into that year, this is the final year of Ed Orgeron. Remember all that conflict and everything? I think it was Ed. I think it might have been BK's it was Brian Kelly's first year, because there was controversy after that Florida State game. Like Kayshon supposedly wasn't happy, or I remember hearing rumblings and stuff about that. But anyways, whole year struggle for Kayshon. Like he was on the team, but the draft stock plummeted. He went from being projected 20th and some of the stuff that I saw. And I remember too, he was projected to be a 1st rounder. The bee's knees fell hard to the Patriots 5th round, which is where I think he should have been drafted after what he put on in 2023 full season. That's my point. Things change. It alters. Play alters, positions alters, situations alter. So anti-tanking example right there, right? And then 2 quarterbacks. Will Levis was projected early 1st round to the Giants. One draft had him 7th overall. And I remember that too. And then he falls to the 2nd round. And we've seen what he did, ironically enough, color code in Tennessee. So if any team should know and learn, it's Tennessee, who has this guy in seat who knows preseason 2023, he was supposed to be this. So we're getting a good value second round. And by the way, I actually applaud that pick. I applauded the Johnny Manziel pick because they fell a lot from where a lot of people projected them. To me, that was worth the risk. It didn't work out in either situation. It didn't become a reward, right, with Manziel or this. But I don't not applaud that pick. That's a great value pick to me. So anyways, but my point is like Will Levis was projected 7th preseason, and then he ends up going second round, not even first. Like the Miami quarterback. Remember him? He transferred to Wisconsin this past year, 2024, and did awful. And this was actually justified preseason because Tyler had a good year the year before. So people were presuming, oh, he'll continue that and do well. Well, he did awful at Miami the following year, which prompted the transfer to Wisconsin under Luke Fickell, did awful again. That's a textbook example, guys, of a guy that was like projected super high early on after some college film, more than Arch had, and he tanks. So, good examples there. And then 2024, Joe Milton. Remember, I could not find a Tennessee fan preseason that was not high on Joe Milton, thinking, well, yeah, he got benched at Michigan early on as starting quarterback. Then he got benched again for Hendon Hooker at Tennessee. But now he's our starting quarterback. So, yeah, we think he's going to be great. No, I knew he wasn't. He had failed twice already as a starting quarterback. And he technically failed 3 times for them, right? They went 8-4 regular season. But he was mediocre, reluctant to run, although he could. He had a good arm, no touch on his passes. Typical Joe Milton, never changed from Michigan onward, right? But he was projected first round by a lot of mock drafts because a lot of people were saying what Vols fans were saying. Oh, we'll be good. Heupel system's great. Heupel system is great. It works. Guys were open. Milton had guys open. Milton didn't deliver. He ends up going 5th round postseason because of what he showed, what he put on. 2 other names that are the most striking to me, and I think the best examples beyond the one in 2023 with Tyler Van Dyke, Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers. Ironically enough, Ewers at Texas. Guys, they were projected first-round picks going into 2024, if you remember the preseason mock drafts. One's not even going to the NFL. Carson Beck, he's staying in college. He got a sweet NIL deal, which that does help, $4.5 million at Miami, supposedly. He's also got a girlfriend. So that, it is what it is. And Quinn Ewers opted to go to the NFL, but he has an injury history, which has affected things. And that's the reason Arch started a little bit in 2024. And he's also not the bee's knees. Like, he's fallen as far as draft stock goes. Now, the top guys in the draft a year later are Cam Ward, who at that point, heading into 2024, had proven it at Washington State and Incarnate Word, which, yeah, that's great. But he needed to prove it again, which is why he came back to college. He proved it again. And then you had Shedeur Sanders, who I think has been great his whole time, going back to his days at Jackson State, and he was projected to be a pretty high player, but they were not the top 2. It was Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers. Now, again, one is going to back to college, did very mediocre for Georgia this past year. That whole offense was mediocre. And then the other is not going to get drafted, probably first round, maybe late first round. Like you're seeing, oh, there's a huge drop off after Shedeur and Cam Ward, who were not at preseason. This is my point. It's fascinating, right? That's why I want to spend time on it. Like, yeah, I probably shouldn't tank for 1 year, let alone potentially 2, knock on wood. If you are thinking about the Arch Manning sweepstakes, we'll call them in the NFL. So just wild examples of why teams should not tank, because I guarantee, take a snapshot of whatever pre-draft you prefer, whatever analyst you prefer to follow, whether it's Mel Kiper, one of the big names, not big names, websites, etc. Save the link, look back at it this time next year. Guarantee it'll be totally different. James Pierce Jr. is another one that comes to mind. Tennessee defensive end. Preseason 2024, a lot of mock drafts had him first overall. Now you got Mason Graham, Michigan, and Abdul Carter, Penn State defensive ends going over him, no questions asked. I don't think that's right. I think James Pierce is the best D end in the draft. I think he was double teamed all year and still had pressures. Stats didn't show it. So now NFL fans have NFL bias and say, oh, big numbers, Abdul Carter. I digress on that. My point is it changes. Now James Pierce is a late mid first round value pick, right? So it changes. Final points here. Again, like I said, Arch could stay for 2 more years. Family wants him to stay. And he also didn't transfer too. So like to me, again, that means like he's thinking long term more so than a lot of other quarterbacks after their first year or two. NIL money, no rush to the NFL, right? He's on a multi-million NFL NIL deal right now. I forget the exact number, but I actually did a ranking on an episode listing the top NIL earning athletes heading into 2025 football players from On3. On3 has a really cool resource around that. So Arch is definitely high on that list. Actually, heading into 2024, he was one and still is actually, because Quinn is technically still on the list. They haven't taken him off yet. I looked a month ago. He was still on there. He's one spot higher than Quinn Ewers, and he's the backup to Quinn Ewers at Texas, or was. So kind of funny. I mean, understandable, right? It's the name. It's brand recognition a lot of times. But I say that to say that's another reason Arch may not leap after this year. He's set. Not only does he have good NIL money, millions of dollars, plural, he has a family that is loaded. There's no other way to say it. Like it's Arch, Eli, Cooper, like that whole family. The Manning family is the Manning family. They got money and well-deserved. They earned it. But it just is what it is. Like this kid has no pressure. Like some of these athletes, current and past, have had to take that leap of faith, so to speak, right? Where they feel like, well, I got to take care of my family or my future, etc. My stock might dip if I have a bad season, and I could cost myself millions of dollars. I could cost millions of dollars that my family could use, so to speak. So you see them leap, and I don't, necessarily fault those guys. Like it is what it is, especially before a couple of years ago, NIL did not exist. So beyond a full-ride scholarship, they weren't really making any money, and they had to make some money. So now Arch is not in that situation. Like it is what it is. And he also has money behind him beyond NIL with his family. This guy's got zero pressure. Stay in college, learn, do everything. Watch Peyton, watch Eli, watch your uncles, watch how they thrived, watch how they improved year over year. Right. So just some, another reason that I wouldn't rush to assume he's going to come out in 2026. And even so, like I said, the order changes of these pre-draft processes so much. I mean, we could be looking at this and like, I'm just throwing a name out there, Caden Salter, quarterback at Colorado, right? Nobody's really heard of him because he played at Liberty the past couple of years at Power Group of Five. He could show out. All of a sudden, we could see Caden Salter as number 1 QB to be drafted, projected in 2026. I understand that's a wild card. I just said it's a wild name I'm just throwing out there. These things are crazy. I just said it. Like preseason, Shedeur Sanders kind of talked about a little bit. Cam Ward, not really at all as far as first round goes. That's totally flip-flopped. 1 year later, they are numbers 1, 2 as far as quarterback go this year. So anyways, you get my point there, right? And then also, like, it's worth noting, players don't want to tank. And they're the ones on the field, right? How do players make their money? How do they maximize their contracts? And I understand this question's rhetorical, but players don't make their money from a GM or from an owner saying, hey, man, we'll pay you an extra $3 million under the table if you tank, if you don't try, if you don't go out there, if you fake an injury. No, players don't do that. Players play and they make their money off of stats. So if the Patriots, for example, were awful this year, but like Kayshon Boutte is playing for another contract. Joe Milton, when they were already done and dead, is showing out against the Bills late in the season. He don't care if he's even heard mumblings that the GM wants the team to tank, that the owner wants the team to tank. They're playing for their stats, their next contract, their extended contract, a bigger contract, a bonus. They all have incentives nowadays on sacks, touchdowns, yardage, etc. Why would they tank? They do not tank. They are not loyal to these organizations. It's not like us as fans, right? Like they are drafted where they're drafted. They're signed where they're signed. They don't have they have their favorite team or teams growing up. I'm sure a lot of them like we did, but that's not necessarily who they're playing for. And even if it was, they're making millions of dollars. They want to ensure their next contract is as large as possible. That does not happen by them tanking on the field, smiling and nodding. That happens by them performing, by them scoring an extra touchdown and making that commission bonus for the end of the season. By them scoring 12 touchdowns instead of 10 when they knew they were already out of the playoffs, but now they've scored 12 and they're a free agent. So their numbers look better and they cash in an extra million or two, right? Like, players aren't going to tank as much as an organization may want to tank, a GM may want to tank. To me, it kind of counters it out anyways, even if that's desired. And if that Gerard Mayo thing was true, I'm not surprised that he did not tank, because he's a player. Like, he played for the Patriots, right? Like, he's a player. He's not an executive that's never played the game, only been a scout, etc. Like you see with some of these, like, he's been in it. He's won freaking Super Bowls. So the last point, and then I'll wrap it up here, is honestly, you're technically right now, I know the season hasn't even started for NFL game-wise, where you could like try to not win to tank for a guy like Arch. But I mean, if you're projecting towards 2026 and thinking about tanking, then you're thinking about how you're going to draft in 2025. How wild does that sound? It's true. It's true. If you put yourself as a GM or an owner right now, if in your mind, you're like, okay, I am the New Orleans Saints. I want to tank. I want to get a high pick. I want to get a quarterback, Arch Manning. How do we do this? Like, going into this season, how do we make sure that we tank? Do I draft strong? I don't know the Saints, in detail. So like, if they need a receiver right now, or they need another quarterback right now, like, do we draft a quarterback? No, because if we do, then we'll win 3 more games. I'm just talking as if I was that person trying to tank. No, we'll win 3 more games, and then we definitely won't get Arch, but we'll still be really bad. We'll have like 5 wins, not make the playoffs, and then we got a journeyman quarterback. And no, I don't want to do that. It's going to impact your draft decisions this year. That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So that, I hope that owners really don't have this mindset, but we've heard the term tanking before, etc. So I definitely wanted to point out these points on why teams should not tank for Arch. The death sentence would be for a GM that does maybe want to tank, or an owner, he stays and decides he's going back to college in 2027, or 2026, which would make him, not eligible until the 2027 NFL draft. So let me know what you think in the comments here. I wanted to sound off on this topic and whether or not he's worth tanking for. Those are my points. I don't think it is. Any player, let alone Arch Manning. And I'm not, discounting Arch. I think he's put on great tape so far in college. He obviously showed it in high school, as we saw throughout here. And just let me know what you think in the comments. Like the episode if you like it. Subscribe to the channel. And then at Pigskin PD, you can see it on screen. Here is my handle on X. And everybody have a day good.